The plane buzzed with the usual pre-flight chatter, sunlight pouring through the cabin windows. My mom, a sweet woman in her late 60s, smiled as the flight attendant guided her to her first-class seat. She had worked her whole life to afford this one vacation, a simple trip to see her grandchildren. But peace didn't last long. Two women, dressed in expensive designer clothes and holding matching purses, stormed down the aisle with entitlement written all over their faces. The younger one gasped dramatically. "Excuse me," she said loudly, pointing at my mom. "There must be some mistake. People like her don't sit in first class." The passengers nearby went silent. My mom looked confused, but stayed calm. "I'm sorry, dear," she said softly, "but this is my seat." The older sister sneered. "You can't afford this. We paid good money for our comfort. You belong back there with the rest." I clenched my fists, watching from a few rows behind, wearing plain clothes not as a passenger, but as the air marshal on duty for this flight. I wasn't supposed to interfere unless there was a security threat. But seeing my own mother humiliated by these arrogant sisters made my blood boil. They had no idea who they were talking to, and they were about to find out the hard way. The morning sun spilled across the tarmac, painting streaks of gold over the polished silver of Flight 327 as it waited at Gate 12. The airport was alive with a hum of rolling luggage, chatter, and the faint aroma of brewed coffee drifting through the terminal. My mother Evelyn walked beside me, holding onto her handbag with the same careful grip she used to hold my hand when I was little. She had never flown first class before. In fact, she hadn't flown in years. "Are you sure about this, Daniel?" she asked with that motherly tone of concern, glancing up at me. "You could have just booked me an economy seat. I don't need all that fancy stuff." I smiled. "Mom, you deserve this. It's been too long since you took a vacation. Besides, it's a short flight. Just relax and enjoy the view." She gave a soft laugh, the kind that always made me forget how tired the world could be. "All right," she said, "but I still feel like I'm stealing someone else's spot." I chuckled. "Trust me, no one deserves it more than you." She didn't know the full story. To her, I was just her son, an ordinary man who worked for the Department of Transportation. She had no idea that I was actually a federal air marshal, flying undercover to ensure the safety of passengers. This wasn't the first time I'd been on this route, but it was the first time my own mother was on board. That made it different. As we reached the gate, the airline attendant smiled warmly. "Good morning, ma'am. First-class boarding has begun. May I see your ticket?" My mom handed it over nervously. The attendant's face lit up. "Seat 2A, one of the best spots on the plane, right by the window." "Thank you, dear," Mom said shyly as she stepped onto the jet bridge. I followed a few rows behind, boarding separately so I could maintain my cover. My seat was further back in row 7, still in the first-class section, but close enough to keep an eye on her. The cabin glowed with daylight filtering through the windows, the seats dressed in navy leather, soft and inviting. Gentle instrumental music played in the background, and passengers chatted quietly as they settled in. My mom placed her handbag neatly under her seat, smoothing her floral cardigan as she admired the view outside. She looked so peaceful, like a child seeing the sky for the first time. That peace wouldn't last long. Two women entered the cabin, their perfume arriving before they did. Both wore designer sunglasses even though the plane was still parked inside the gate. Their heels clacked sharply against the floor as they strutted down the aisle. The younger one, tall and blonde with perfectly curled hair, scrolled through her phone without looking up. The other, slightly older with platinum streaks and a sharp jawline, scanned the seats with a frown. "Where are our seats?" she snapped at the flight attendant. "Right this way, ladies," the attendant replied politely. "Seats to B and to C, just beside the window there." The women strutted forward until they stopped dead. My mom was already seated in 2A, reading the safety card. The older one, I'd later learn her name was Karen, narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me," she said loudly. "I think you're in the wrong seat." My mom looked up with a kind smile. "Oh, hello, dear. I don't think so. My ticket says 2A." The younger one, Kelly, scoffed and rolled her eyes. "That can't be right. They don't usually give these seats to people like you." My mom blinked, confused. "People like me?" she asked gently. Karen crossed her arms. "No offense, but first class is usually for business travelers or people who can afford it. Maybe there's been a mistake. Let's see your ticket." Mom hesitated, clearly embarrassed. She handed it over, and Karen snatched it like she was checking for counterfeit money. She read it, frowned, and gave a tight smile. "Well, this does say 2A, but maybe the airline made an error. My sister and I always sit by the window. We prefer that seat." Mom gave a soft chuckle, trying to keep things pleasant. "Oh, I see. Well, I'm already settled here, dear. Perhaps you can enjoy the aisle this time." Kelly sighed dramatically. "This is ridiculous," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Mom, can you believe this? They're letting anyone into first class these days." Several passengers turned their heads. I watched carefully from a few rows away, pretending to scroll on my phone. I wasn't supposed to intervene unless there was an immediate threat, but my instincts were already burning. I'd seen disrespect before, but not aimed at my own mother. Karen pressed the call button, tapping her long nails impatiently on the armrest. A flight attendant appeared quickly. her professional smile unwavering. Is everything all right here? Karen smiled sweetly but with venom in her tone. No, it's not. This woman is in the wrong seat. I believe there's been a mix-up. The attendant checked both tickets again, confirming politely, I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mrs. Evelyn's seat is indeed 2A. Everything is correct. Karen's fake smile faltered. Are you sure? Maybe you should check again. She doesn't really look like she belongs here. The attendant stiffened slightly. Ma'am, all of our passengers belong here. If there's anything else you need, I'd be happy to help. She turned and walked away before Karen could argue. Kelly leaned close to her sister. Unbelievable. I'm not sitting next to her. Me neither, Karen hissed. Let's see if we can get her moved. Mom tried to ignore them. She adjusted her seatbelt and looked out the window, pretending to admire the view. I saw her hands trembling slightly. My chest tightened. I wanted to step in, to defend her, but I couldn't blow my cover. Not yet. The sisters continued whispering, their words sharp and cruel. She probably won a lottery ticket or something, Kelly sneered. Or maybe she's someone's maid. Karen laughed softly. Oh please. If she can afford this, I'll eat my purse. The other passengers looked uncomfortable, but no one said a word. That's the thing about public humiliation. It freezes people. No one wants to get involved until it's too late. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. My mother, bless her heart, refused to give them the reaction they wanted. Instead, she smiled at the flight attendant offering drinks and said, Orange juice, please. Her voice didn't shake. She held onto her grace-like armor. When the attendant walked away, Karen muttered just loud enough, unbelievable. People like her should be grateful to even be allowed up here. That was the moment I stopped pretending to read. My pulse slowed, and my training kicked in. I memorized their behavior, tone, posture, all the signs of entitlement I'd seen turn dangerous in past flights. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, cheerful and steady. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard Flight 327 non-stop to Miami. We'll be departing shortly, so please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts. The sisters finally sat, grumbling about unfair treatment. My mom sipped her juice and gazed at the runway, a quiet tear catching the sunlight. I promised myself one thing at that moment. If they crossed the line again, if they made her cry one more time, I wouldn't just be her son, I'd be the air marshal. And this flight was about to teach those sisters what first class truly meant. The engines roared to life, and the plane began its slow crawl toward the runway. Warm daylight streamed through the windows, turning the cabin into a calm golden space. My mother sat quietly, hands folded on her lap, her face turned toward the view outside. She looked peaceful, but I could see the faint tension in her shoulders. The two sisters beside her, Karen and Kelly, were far from peaceful. They complained about everything. The seat's too tight, Kelly muttered, adjusting her handbag for the 5th time. The air's too dry, Karen added, snapping her fingers for the attendant like she was summoning a servant. Can we get some bottled water that's not cold? I don't drink anything below room temperature. The attendant, ever professional, smiled and brought the water without comment. But I could tell from her polite, tight-lipped expression that she'd dealt with their type before. Most of us in law enforcement have. Entitled people with a hint of cruelty. They always think rules and decency don't apply to them. As the plane accelerated down the runway, my mom gripped the armrests. I saw her lips move. She was praying softly. The nose lifted, and within seconds, the aircraft soared into the clear blue sky. Passengers relaxed, murmuring conversations filling the cabin once more. But the calm didn't last long. About 15 minutes into the flight, a flight attendant began serving breakfast trays. The smell of fresh croissants and scrambled eggs drifted through the cabin. My mom smiled warmly when her tray arrived. Thank you, dear, she said, her voice gentle. Karen's tray came next. She barely looked at it before wrinkling her nose. This isn't what I ordered, she snapped. I said gluten-free, low-carb, dairy-free, high-protein and no salt. How hard can that be? The attendant apologized softly. I'm sorry, ma'am, but that specific meal wasn't pre-ordered on your ticket. Karen rolled her eyes. Well then fix it. I'm afraid we can't make special meals mid-flight, the attendant explained politely. Kelly smirked and said, You'd think for the price we pay, they'd serve something decent. She shot a glance toward my mom's tray. Looks like even the charity cases get better meals than us. The words hit me like a punch. My mother froze, her fork midair. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the engines. Then she turned her head slightly and said, in the calmest tone imaginable, There's no need for rudeness, dear. We're all sharing the same sky. Karen laughed harshly. Oh, how poetic. You think sitting in a fancy seat makes you one of us? Before I could think, my pen nearly snapped in my hand. My training drilled one rule into every air marshal. Never act emotionally. But this was my mother. They were humiliating. My mother, who had worked 2 jobs, raised me alone, and still treated everyone with kindness, even those who didn't deserve it. Still, I stayed put. I couldn't reveal myself unless absolutely necessary. So I waited, my eyes locked on them. The attendant returned to collect trash and empty cups. Karen made a show of complaining again, deliberately spilling a little juice on the aisle. You missed a spot, she said mockingly. The attendant kept her composure. cleaning up without a word. But my mom couldn't take it anymore. "Please," she said softly. "There's no reason to treat her like that." Kelly turned on her with a glare. "Excuse me. Did we ask for your opinion?" "I'm just saying." "No, you're not just saying," Karen interrupted. "You're trying to lecture us. And honestly, it's embarrassing. You should be thankful they even let you sit up here. We paid for this experience." Several passengers nearby turned their heads. I saw one man in a business suit frown and shake his head. Another woman whispered, "Unbelievable." My mom sighed and leaned back, trying to ignore them. But Karen wasn't done. A few minutes later, she leaned over my mom's armrest. "Tell me something," she said in a mocking tone. "How did you afford this? Did your son buy it for you with his credit card? Or maybe you used your retirement money?" My mom's face softened, her eyes kind but sad. "My son surprised me," she said simply. "He thought I deserved something special." Kelly scoffed. "Special, please. Some of us earn our comfort, you know." That was it. My blood boiled, and I stood up slowly, pretending to stretch. I walked down the aisle toward the restroom but stopped near their row, leaning slightly toward the attendant at the galley. "Keep an eye on seats 2 or 3 to see," I whispered quietly. "They're getting aggressive." She nodded subtly. She'd seen it too. When I returned to my seat, I could see Karen shifting uncomfortably. She reached for her bag in the overhead bin, accidentally or perhaps intentionally bumping my mom's head with her elbow. "Oh, sorry," Karen said flatly, not meaning a word. Mom touched her forehead. "It's all right, dear," she said softly, though her voice trembled a little. That was enough for me. I rose again, this time with authority in my stance. My badge wasn't visible yet, but my tone carried quiet power. "Is there a problem here?" I asked calmly, stepping closer. Karen blinked at me, clearly annoyed. "Excuse me, who are you?" "Just another passenger," I said evenly. "But I couldn't help overhearing the way you've been speaking to that woman." Kelly rolled her eyes. "Oh great, another hero. Mind your own business," Karen sneered. "She's not complaining. So why are you—" I met her gaze steadily. "Because there's a difference between having a bad day and bullying someone. You might want to think about which one you're doing." The surrounding passengers went silent. The captain's voice suddenly came over the intercom, announcing mild turbulence ahead, breaking the tension momentarily. The seatbelt sign lit up. Everyone buckled in. Karen muttered something under her breath, glaring out the window. My mom gave me a small, grateful smile. She didn't realize that my authority went beyond words, but soon she'd know. As the turbulence passed, the sisters resumed whispering. I caught fragments. "He's nosy. Probably some wannabe cop. Bet he can't even afford this seat either." I ignored it, keeping my eyes on the aisle. My mind wasn't on their insults anymore. I was thinking ahead about how easily arrogance turns to aggression once alcohol gets involved. Sure enough, half an hour later, Karen ordered white wine. When the attendant hesitated, she snapped, "It's a 2-hour flight, not rehab. Pour it." The attendant complied. By the time she finished her second glass, Karen's voice grew louder. "You know what's wrong with this world," she declared to no one in particular. "People like her think they're equals." She pointed at my mom again. "You think sitting here makes you important. Newsflash, money can't buy class." The irony almost made me laugh. My mom didn't answer. She just sat there, looking out the window as the clouds drifted beneath her, calm, dignified, and heartbreakingly quiet. I leaned forward slightly, my hand resting near my badge beneath my jacket. One more insult, one more shove, one more reason. That was all it would take. The moment was coming. I could feel it. And when it did, those sisters would finally learn that the quiet, gray-haired woman they mocked wasn't just another passenger. She was the mother of the man who kept this entire flight safe. The plane had leveled off at 30,000 feet, slicing through the sky like a silver arrow. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft chime, and a few passengers began stretching or chatting quietly. The morning sunlight poured through the windows, turning the cabin bright and calm again, at least for most people. For my mother, it was anything but calm. She sat rigidly in her seat, her hands resting on her lap. The two sisters beside her, Karen and Kelly, had not learned their lesson. If anything, the turbulence had only paused their cruelty. Now that the flight was smooth again, their arrogance returned twice as strong. Karen swirled her third glass of wine, her perfectly manicured fingers glinting under the sunlight. "Can you believe this?" she said to Kelly, her voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "They let anyone sit in first class these days. No standards anymore." Kelly giggled, chewing a strawberry from her fruit plate. "Maybe she won a contest," she whispered. "Or maybe she's one of those sympathy cases. You know, airlines sometimes upgrade old people for free." My mother didn't say a word. She kept her eyes on the window, pretending to admire the view. The clouds below looked soft and endless, like an ocean of light. I could see her reflection in the glass, calm on the outside, but her eyes were tired. I tightened my jaw. Every instinct in me screamed to step in, to shut those women down right then and there. But I had to stay professional. As a federal air marshal, revealing myself without a clear threat could compromise not just my mission but future flights too. Still, I kept my focus locked on them. The flight attendant returned with a tray of fresh snacks. She smiled at my mother first, Would you like some tea, ma'am? Yes, thank you, dear Mom said kindly. Before she could take a sip, Karen's arm shot out. Excuse me, she said sharply, glaring at the attendant. Where's our refill? We've been waiting forever. The attendant blinked, clearly thrown off. I'll bring it in just a moment, ma'am. I was serving. I don't care who you were serving, Karen interrupted. We're paying customers. Maybe you should serve the people who actually belong here first. The attendant's polite smile didn't falter, but her eyes said everything. Exhaustion, frustration, and the kind of quiet dignity only someone used to verbal abuse could hold on to. She nodded softly and walked away. Karen turned back to my mother. You see, this is what happens when airlines start giving away upgrades. Everything goes downhill. I bet you're not even used to this kind of service, are you? My mom took a breath, steadying herself. I'm just grateful to be here, she said gently. Life is too short to be unkind. Kelly snorted. Oh please, don't start preaching. At that moment, Karen leaned forward and placed her half-empty wine glass on my mother's tray table. Hold that for a second, would you? She said sarcastically. The glass wobbled. My mom instinctively reached out to steady it, but a bit of red wine splashed across her cardigan. The sisters laughed, not loudly, but cruelly. Oh no, Kelly said mockingly. I hope it's not too expensive. That looks like something from a thrift store anyway. That was the moment the air in the cabin changed. The laughter stopped. Every nearby passenger turned their heads. The sound of the engine suddenly louder in the silence. My mom looked down at the stain, her hands trembling slightly. Then she looked up, not angry, not broken, but disappointed. You should be ashamed, she said softly. Money can't buy manners, dear. Karen's face twisted. Excuse me, you heard me, my mom replied calmly. You can keep your seat, your wine, and your pride, but none of that will make you kind. Karen slammed her tray table up with a loud clack. Who do you think you are, talking to me like that? You think because you're old, you can just… That was it. I stood up, sliding my badge from inside my jacket before I even realized I was doing it. That's enough, I said firmly, my voice carrying through the cabin. Karen turned, startled. Who are you to tell me what's enough? I stepped closer, flashing the badge. The small golden shield gleamed under the sunlight. Federal Air Marshal, I said clearly. And that woman you've been harassing for the past hour happens to be my mother. The reaction was instant. The chatter in the cabin stopped. The attendant froze mid. Karen blinked rapidly, her confidence draining from her face. Kelly's mouth fell open. You're your mother, Karen stammered, her voice suddenly small. I nodded slowly, my gaze steady. Yes, the same woman you said didn't belong here. The same woman you mocked, insulted, and spilled wine on. The sisters sat speechless, faces pale. Karen tried to recover, forcing a laugh. We didn't mean anything, I cut her off. Save that I've been watching since takeoff. I've documented every word, every action. You've violated federal passenger conduct laws and caused a disturbance on board. Do you understand how serious that is? Karen's eyes widened. Wait, are we under arrest? Not yet, I said coldly. But you're done talking. You'll sit quietly for the rest of this flight. You'll not speak another word to my mother, the crew, or any passenger. Is that clear? Kelly nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Karen swallowed hard, finally lowering her gaze. We didn't know, she whispered. That's the problem, I replied. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect. The attendant approached quietly, her eyes full of gratitude. Sir, she said softly, should I inform the captain? Yes, I said. Tell him we have 2 unruly passengers who will need to be escorted for questioning when we land. Karen opened her mouth, but one look from me silenced her as the attendant walked toward the cockpit. My mom reached for my hand. Danny, she whispered, her eyes wide with worry. Please, don't make a scene. I softened immediately. It's all right, Mom, you didn't do anything wrong. I just did my job. She gave a small nod and smiled weakly. You've always protected people, even when you didn't have to. I smiled back, especially when I have to. For the rest of the flight, the sisters sat stiff and silent, their arrogance gone. The other passengers, once quiet observers, began whispering to each other, some smiling, some nodding in approval. The man in the business suit gave me a subtle thumbs up. The flight attendant brought my mom a warm towel and a fresh cardigan from the crew's closet. Compliments of the airline, ma'am, she said kindly. You look lovely. My mom blushed. Thank you, dear. When the captain announced the descent into Miami, the sunlight had shifted, flooding the cabin with golden afternoon glow. The sisters didn't say a word. Not to my mom, not to anyone. They kept their heads down, pretending to sleep as the wheels touched the runway. My mom reached over and squeezed my hand gently. You didn't just protect me, she said softly. You reminded them and everyone else what respect really means. I looked at her and smiled. You taught me that a long time ago. Outside the window, the Miami skyline gleamed in the distance, and for the first time all day, the world felt perfectly still. But this wasn't over. Once we landed, the sisters would learn that actions at 30,000 feet have consequences, and this time, justice was already on board. The plane began its descent toward Miami, sunlight gleaming off the wings as clouds drifted past like slow-moving cotton. The calm hum of the engines filled the cabin, and passengers started preparing for landing, folding tray tables, adjusting seats, and fastening seatbelts. But despite the soft atmosphere, tension still hung thick in the air. Karen and Kelly sat stiffly in their seats, avoiding everyone's eyes. The arrogance that had once fueled them was gone, replaced by a nervous stillness. My mother sat quietly by the window, her hands clasped in her lap. She wasn't gloating or angry, that wasn't her way. Instead, she just looked sad, said that people could act so cruelly and still think themselves right. The flight attendant passed by one last time, offering water before landing. When she reached our row, she smiled gently at my mom. "Would you like one more glass, ma'am?" Mom shook her head. "No thank you. You've been wonderful." The attendant's smile grew warmer. "So have you. I'm sorry for what you went through earlier." My mom gave a faint smile. "Don't be. You handled it gracefully. I just wish more people would treat others the way they wish to be treated." The attendant nodded, her expression soft but full of respect. "The world needs more passengers like you, Mrs. Evelyn." A few rows back, I noticed Karen glance sideways. She looked tired, her face no longer smug but pale and uneasy. Kelly was whispering something to her, her tone anxious. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. They were scared. The kind of scared that comes when you realize your actions have real-world consequences. I leaned forward slightly. "You'll be escorted off calmly," I said quietly, my voice low but firm. "No shouting, no attitude. The authorities will just want to speak to you about your behavior." Karen stiffened but didn't respond. Kelly gave a small nod, her lips pressed tightly together. When the captain's voice came over the intercom, it felt like a release. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Miami International Airport. Local time is 10:47 a.m., and it's a beautiful day outside, 78 degrees with clear skies. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign has been turned off." As the wheels touched down, the jolt of landing rippled through the cabin. My mom looked relieved. She'd always been a nervous flyer. "We're here," she whispered softly, smiling at the window. "Yes," I said, glancing toward the sisters. "We are." The plane rolled to the gate, slowing gradually. I took a deep breath, unfastened my belt, and stood up once the seatbelt sign went off. The attendant met my eyes and gave a discreet nod. She'd already informed the captain and ground security. Karen tried to stand too, but I held up a hand. "Sit down," I said quietly. "You'll wait until everyone else disembarks." Her jaw tightened. "We didn't do anything criminal," she muttered, her voice low. I leaned closer. "You verbally harassed a passenger and disrupted crew operations on a flight. That's called interference with the duties of the crew. That is criminal." Kelly swallowed hard. Are we going to jail?" I didn't answer directly. "That depends on how you behave from this point forward." The passengers began exiting row by row, many of them casting sympathetic glances toward my mum. One woman paused to squeeze her shoulder gently. "You handled yourself beautifully, ma'am," she said softly. "Thank you, dear," Mom replied with a warm smile. A man in a suit gave me a subtle nod as he passed. "Good work, Marshal," he whispered, having overheard part of what happened. I returned the nod silently. When the cabin finally emptied, 2 uniformed airport security officers stepped on board. One of them approached me quietly. "We got the report. These the 2 passengers." "Yes," I confirmed. "Row 2, seats B and C. Verbal harassment, disruptive behavior, potential civil interference. Keep it calm." The officer nodded, then addressed the sisters. "Ladies, we're going to need you to come with us for a brief conversation. Please gather your belongings." Karen stood up slowly, trying to keep her composure. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "All we did was talk." The officer's tone was neutral but firm. "Ma'am, this isn't the time for debate. Let's go." Kelly avoided everyone's eyes as she followed, clutching her designer purse tightly. My mom watched quietly as they were led off the plane. "I almost feel sorry for them," she said softly. I exhaled. "Me too," but they made their choice. We waited until they were gone before stepping off the plane ourselves. The bright Miami sunlight hit us immediately, warm, clear, and vibrant. The contrast between the peaceful sky outside and the ugliness that had just happened inside the plane felt surreal. Inside the terminal, we stopped near the waiting area. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay, Mom?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm fine. But I hope those girls learn something from this." I smiled faintly. "If they don't, life will teach them again." She looked up at me with her gentle eyes, the same eyes that had seen me through every mistake, every triumph. "You didn't have to step in like that, you know," she said softly. "I could have handled it." "I know," I said, "but no one gets to treat you that way. Not on my watch." Her lips curved into a proud smile. "Still the protector, huh?" "Always," I said, chuckling. A few minutes later, the 2 sisters were escorted through the terminal by the officers. Their sunglasses were off now, and their expressions were heavy with embarrassment. People turned to stare, some recognizing them from the flight. Karen avoided my gaze, but Kelly glanced toward us briefly, her eyes full of regret as they disappeared down the corridor. My mom sighed. "I hope they learn kindness from this. Maybe next time they'll think before they speak." I nodded. "Some lessons are learned the hard way." We made our way toward baggage claim. The air smelled of sea salt and sunshine, a reminder that this trip was supposed to be a vacation. I didn't want my mom's memory of it to be tainted by cruelty. As we waited for her suitcase, she looked at me thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "what you did up there wasn't just about me. You showed everyone on that plane that standing up for what's right doesn't always require anger. Sometimes it just requires courage." I smiled. "You've been teaching me that my whole life." She laughed softly. "Maybe, but I didn't expect to see it in action 30,000 feet above the ground." When her luggage finally appeared, she grabbed it and turned toward the exit. The morning light poured through the glass windows, washing over her silver hair like a halo. Outside, taxis lined up, and the palm trees swayed gently in the warm Miami breeze. My mom inhaled deeply, smiling. "It's beautiful here," she said. "Yeah," I said, slipping on my sunglasses. "It is." As we walked out together, the tension from the flight finally melted away. I glanced back once, seeing the plane parked by the gate, quiet, still, innocent again. That flight had carried more than passengers. It had carried lessons about respect, dignity, and the quiet strength of a kind heart. And as we stepped into the sunlight, I realized something. Justice didn't always come from badges or laws. Sometimes it came from the unwavering grace of a woman who refused to let cruelty steal her peace. That day, my mom wasn't just a passenger. She was a reminder to everyone watching that real class doesn't come from where you sit, but from how you treat the people beside you. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains, soft and golden. The sounds of Miami stirred outside, waves, gulls, and distant laughter from the beach. My mother sat on the balcony, a cup of tea in her hands, gazing out at the horizon. There was a calmness in her face that made me smile. After everything that had happened on that flight, she finally looked at peace. I joined her with 2 plates of breakfast. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" I asked, setting the food down. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "No, but that's all right. My mind kept replaying yesterday, not the anger or the noise, but how it ended. I hope those girls find a better path." I nodded. "They might get the chance sooner than you think." Just as I said that, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from the airline popped up. "Passenger complaint follow-up. To passengers from Flight 228, have requested to issue a formal apology." Mom's eyebrows lifted. "An apology to me?" "Yeah," I said, scrolling. "Apparently, they've been fined by the airline and had their privileges suspended, but they asked to meet you before we leave." She stared out at the ocean for a long moment, then sighed. "I suppose they deserve the chance to apologize. Everyone deserves one chance to change." Later that afternoon, we met in the airport lounge before our connecting flight. Karen and Kelly were already there, sitting stiffly on a leather bench. Gone were their flashy sunglasses and smug attitudes. They looked humbled, quiet, even remorseful when they saw my mom. They stood up immediately. Karen spoke first, her voice low and trembling. "Mrs. Evelyn, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I was rude, entitled, and disrespectful. There's no excuse for it. I let my temper and pride take over." Kelly nodded quickly, tears glinting in her eyes. "We both did. We were trying to show off and ended up showing the worst versions of ourselves. We embarrassed ourselves and we hurt you." My mom studied them for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. "I accept your apology." Karen blinked, clearly surprised. "You do?" "Yes," Mom replied, "because forgiveness isn't about approving what happened. It's about freeing ourselves from bitterness. You've already faced the consequences. What matters now is what you do after this." Kelly wiped her eyes. "I promise we'll do better. We already volunteered for a community project helping at an airport assistance program for elderly travelers. We figured it might help us see what we didn't before." A gentle smile tugged at my mother's lips. "That's a good start," she said. "Remember, kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything." For a few moments there was silence. The tension that had once burned between them was gone, replaced by something rare and honest, understanding. Karen glanced at me. "And you," she said quietly. "Thank you for not letting it get worse. We deserved worse than what we got." I shrugged. "You deserved a lesson, not destruction," I said. "And I think you've learned it." They both nodded, gratitude softening their faces. Then they left quietly, their heads low but their hearts lighter. When they were gone, my mom looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You know," she whispered, "that moment right there, that's why I never believe people are beyond hope." I smiled. "You've always seen the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it, because someone once did the same for me," she said gently. "It's the only reason I became who I am." The day passed peacefully after that. We took a cab to the beach, walked along the shore, and let the waves roll over our feet. The sky turned orange and pink as the sun began to set. Mom's laughter mingled with the sound of the ocean, pure, genuine, and free. She turned to me and said softly, "You know what yesterday taught me? Power doesn't come from anger or control. It comes from dignity. When people try to humiliate you, the best response is grace, because grace disarms cruelty." I nodded, watching the waves crash. "And you showed that perfectly, Mom." She chuckled. "Maybe I did. But I'm proud of you too. You stood up, not with rage, but with strength. As we sat there, the moment felt like closure. The incident on the plane was no longer a wound, it was a memory that carried meaning. Two people had learned humility, and one woman had proven that strength can be gentle. Later that night, as we packed to return home, my mom turned to me. "You should tell this story someday," she said, "not to embarrass them, but to remind people that kindness can win even at 30,000 feet. I smiled. Maybe I already have a place for it. She tilted her head. "Your channel." "Yeah," I said. "HOA advisor. It's more than just about communities, it's about humanity. This story fits perfectly." Her eyes softened. "Then share it. The world needs more reminders like that." The next morning, we left the hotel early. The air was crisp, the streets quiet, except for the gentle hum of cars. As the taxi drove us to the airport, I looked out the window at the palm trees swaying in the sunrise. Something about the light felt different, clearer, calmer, almost symbolic. When we boarded our flight home, the flight attendant recognized us. "Mrs. Evelyn," she said warmly. "Good to see you again. I heard about how that situation ended yesterday. I think you changed more than just two passengers." Mom smiled humbly. "Maybe, but we all have the power to do that, don't we?" The attendant nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, ma'am, we really do." As the plane ascended into the sky, I felt a deep sense of peace. The clouds below shimmered like silver cotton, endless and soft. Mom leaned her head against the window, closing her eyes, finally resting without worry. I watched her, proud, inspired, and grateful. Everything that happened had turned into something more than just a flight story. It became a lesson that compassion isn't weakness, and silence in the face of cruelty isn't surrender. It's wisdom. Somewhere above the clouds, I realized this story wasn't about conflict. It was about redemption, about what happens when people choose to learn instead of hate. When the plane landed, I helped Mom with her bag and smiled. "You know," I said, "you really were the hero of this whole story." She laughed softly. "No, my dear, I was just the reminder." "Of what?" She looked at me, her eyes shining with warmth. "That the higher you go in the sky or in life, the more important it is to stay grounded in kindness." We walked off the plane together, hand in hand, into a new day, leaving behind not bitterness, but a story worth remembering. Because sometimes, the greatest journeys don't happen between two destinations. They happen inside the hearts that choose to forgive.